Going very late. Right, welcome councillors and members of the public. The purpose of today's forum is to hear from members of the community on issues that relate to climate change and the environment and exchange ideas and views. And so no decisions will be made at this forum today. The forum is being held in the supper room, Waihinga Centre, Martinborough Town Hall. It is being live streamed and will be available to view on the council's YouTube channel. So hello to everybody joining us on YouTube. The emergency exit for this room are the door you came in and the exit behind me. And if we need to evacuate the building, use one of these exits and assemble outside by the playground. And please remain at the assembly area until the building has been confirmed clear. I'd like to invite Councillor Maynard to open us with a karakia this morning.
Kia horo te marino, kia whakapapa paunamu te moana. Kei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai. Tātou, ia tātou katoa. Huie, tai ki.
All right, so we have a presentation. Very, very fortunate to have Madison coming to talk to us today. He's going to tell us some really cheery news about climate change. The floor is yours. So, Robin, just before you get started, we put aside 15 minutes for you, but we've had a cancellation. So if you go a bit over time, that's okay.
Stand here where this camera can't see me.
As long as the microphones can pick you up, because we're not able to.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Robin Ramsden, Taka Ingoa, resident of Featherston, for those who don't know. So 332.22 parts per million monthly average. That's what the carbon dioxide level was when the month I was born. It is now, as of last month, 423.28 parts per million. Almost gone up 100 in nearly 50 years. That's quite a bit. Okay. So the last time we had that much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was the Paleocene thermal maximum 55.5 million years ago. Okay, so that's how long ago that was. Okay, so a bit of background. I've just completed a Bachelor of Science in Geology from Victoria University, Environment Science Society, where I learned most of the climate change stuff. So as a family, we recycle. Careful with what we purchase. We try to avoid plastics as much as we can. We compost, we grow some of our own food. We have waste reduction chickens, use public transport, and we own an EV. So we've had the luxury of moving to buying an EV, but I know so many people don't. So I'm here to talk to you about, partially about the severity that we might be expecting, and also that I am organising a climate strike. So that's going to be in the Featherston Town Square. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Okay. Okay, so you guys know who you are. I looked you up to terms of reference, and it provides strategic thinking and planning around climate change and the environment. They will promote the environmental well-being of our communities and now into the future. Yes. Okay. You guys have a lot of work to do. Sorry. I'm sorry. We're working on it. Okay, so you guys will need to use every mechanism you can in council to work on climate change. So, that way? That works? Yay. Okay, so how do we know? I'm not going to cover this very much. Scientists have been working on this since the mid-1960s. There is documentation from the 1880s, where scientists, chemists went, oh, what do we do? We're adding all this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. They did some back of the envelope math and went, have to keep an eye on this, and they did. So you know, probably aware of the Keeling curve. So it's been recorded since the mid-1960s, the rate of carbon dioxide going up in the atmosphere. So we know from our geological records, so as a geologist, we know from what's happened in the past, and we can use various things to measure that. We have our atmospheric records, our modern temperature records, our harbour master records, which are measuring sea level rise, just to name a few. When we know because of maths, physics, chemistry, geology, and statistics. My statistics lecturer very boldly said, if you don't understand climate change, you don't understand statistics. So that's where we are. And she said that in front of my father, which is beautiful. Okay, so know thyself. This is Greek. This was my first degree was Greek. So know thyself, know where our problem is so that we can fix our problem. So this is our most recent emissions profile. We've gone down 0.8% in agriculture emissions. Good job, guys. But energy is 18% of our profile. And this is one of the things we can focus on and fix quickly. I mean, quickly as in the decade, not tomorrow. And we've got some good news with manufacturing construction, because they've just announced today the steel mill is going to be moving to one of their processes is going to be electricity based. And our own electricity generation is still with coal and a gas powered furnaces, which we produce. So there's some of the emissions that we're just not going to be able to stop because they're natural, and we should let them do their thing. Because before humans came along and had a pre-industrial revolution, carbon in, carbon out was pretty equal.
Just with that one, Robin, can we just clarify? So is that just for the South Wairarapa?
No, that's New Zealand.
That's New Zealand. Okay, thank you.
It's very hard to get this information for South Wales.
Yeah, break it down. Oh.
So this is the latest. This is the latest IPCC for the AER6 report. This is worldwide. So these are the implementing policies. And this is what we need to do to limit to 1.5 and to limit to 2. So as you can see, we're not doing so good on the whole policy front as a world. Okay. And this information is from the Climate Action Tracker, which tracks the global effort, but they break it up into country. And overall, we are highly insufficient on our policies. So we're not doing enough. We don't have enough policies in place. We look a little good because we've got quite a lot of forestry that we can use as a sink, but overall we're not doing so great. Yeah. So sea level rise. So this is I should know this because my lecturer did this. Said the sea level rise. This is the coastal vertical land movement. So all of these blue dots are down dots. So this is where we're going down, we're subsiding, and sea level is rising. So sea level is rising about 3 to 4 millimeters a year. We're going down between 5 and 9 millimeters a year. So we're going to have problems along the coast. So with sea level rise also comes, as you all are well aware, storm surges, inundation into aquifers. So that because of the way the hydrostatic pressure works, when you get the sea coming in, it pushes the salt water into the aquifers because they will meet the sea pretty much. And then you're going to get saltwater infiltration into your aquifers and you'll lose viability further up inland than the sea. And then we'll lose our water for farming. So that's a problem.
Robin, can I take a question? Well, you do, if you don't mind. Yeah. So one of the things that has highlighted over the years is storm surge. Probably sea level rise will be incremental over a generation, but the more intensity we're seeing with storms, we're seeing a lot of storm surge on our coastlines, which is causing erosion and a whole raft of other things. And that's something that's actually happening now.
Yes, it has been for quite a while.
Yes.
So with every degree of warming, global warming across the whole globe, so we're at 1.1 now. For every degree, we get 7% more moisture in the atmosphere and 20% more energy. At least that's what I read. So now we've got a problem in that we've got the sea is warming up, and so water expands when it gets hot, right? When it warms up. So we're getting thermal expansion, but because we're losing glaciers and ice caps, we're getting increase in water from those, and those are quite dramatically large. When we were sitting around in labs at uni, they go, well, if Greenland goes first, that'll cool down the northern hemisphere and get a general sea level rise. Antarctica goes first, will cool down because of all the infiltration of cold water into the system, but we'll all get sea level rise. So really, they were like, well, we want Antarctica to go first because we'll be better off for a decade. So yeah, they were like, but they don't know which is. But you know, this is not might not be in our lifetimes, but it's certainly in our children's lifetimes.
Robin, if I may.
Not young children's.
Sorry, I was wondering if any part of your work you've overlaid the climate change impacts on our coastal communities there with the impacts of earthquakes or other natural disasters. The reason why is because I know that GNS Science has done some work around liquefaction.
Yeah.
And the whole area around Lake Wairarapa, for example, is I understand in the event of an earthquake is highly impacted by liquefaction, as is in fact Featherstone, Greytown, so on and so forth. So it'd be really interesting because clearly you know, to have the two side by side, because the two are very much linked, aren't they? If we're dealing with sea level rises at the same time as natural disasters, you almost double the impact of the disaster, don't you?
Yeah. So anywhere. So the Wairarapa, I've been up. So this is all basement. Grey-Wakey. This is all Grey-Wakey. All along here is alluvial plain. So it's layers and layers of silt, gravel, silt, gravel, silt, gravel, silt, gravel. And actually up in here you can get ice rafted rocks from Antarctic ice sheets. As the icebergs came up, they melt and drop their lovely little rocks on the bottom. So you can get all through the streams, and up in here you can get these rocks. Sorry. But yeah, anywhere there's lots of water and there's water underground, which is why the mapping that the regional council's just done is so important, because they should be able to pick out more places and have a bit more certainty about where those liquefaction areas are. So yeah, if you live too close to a stream, and I'm like when we bought our house, I was very careful where to buy that house in Featherstone. I checked the location of all the streams and I checked all the topography just to make sure that we're on a bit that is less prone to liquefaction. And I spent weeks working that out to make sure that we wouldn't be buying in a place that we didn't have to stress about. But not everybody does that. And in Featherstone, we've got houses right up against Donald's Creek. And so in one case, you've got a house in Donald's Creek's floodplain. And when it floods, you get an earthquake, and now you've got everyone's houses all wonky. And so, yeah, so I'm a bit more relaxed about earthquakes now that I've studied them more. But it is a problem because we are at the bottom of the slow slip as well. And if that slow slip decides to start moving, because we're in the sticky part of the slow slip, if our sticky part starts moving, then we could have quite a few earthquakes, like the Pahangana sequence we've just had. But yeah, everyone near a river needs to be aware of that and have a plan. So I'm encouraging the regional, what are they called now, WEMO, to instead of teaching about earthquakes all the time, which is great, and I'm glad everyone knows what to do, maybe we need to know what to do in situations where we have liquefaction. Do you run outside? No, you don't. You stay put, right? Because there were people in Christchurch who ran outside, got stuck in a liquefaction hole and nearly died. So we have to take our learnings from Christchurch, which are the liquefaction prone place, and apply them here as well in our communities so they know what to do.
What about this point?
That's a good problem. So anything else? No? Okay.
I'll just let you know you're like about 15 minutes in now.
Oh, really? Okay. Go on and talk. Okay.
Right.
So this is the May, June, July forecast from NIWA. So increased average temperature. These don't look bad. This doesn't look good at all. Although we've noticed it's the end of May and it's not very cold yet, no frosts yet.
What's the time period?
I wake up early this morning. It's definitely cross this morning, walk into.
Sorry,
This is May, June, July prediction.
can you,
This year,
another slide again?
the next 3 months.
The next 2 months that,
We're in it, so we're this May, June and July.
okay,
The temperature above our average, rest of the country above.
so the East Coast is basically above average will be above average over the next few months, is that correct?
This hasn't changed really in the last couple of
Okay.
years.
Okay, yeah,
Go back and look and it's always red.
Do you believe the average will be made up of a bigger variety? Because, yeah, some of my understanding is, we've got a 1 degree warming so far,
Yeah,
but that's made up of a bigger range, which is actually as
Yeah,
much
that's
problem.
average.
Yeah, it's as much as the problem as a 1 degree rise.
We might we could be getting more than a 1 degree average for the country. But now we've got problems. So this is rainfall. Looks as we're normal, but we know that that's not true anymore because we've had so much. But we'll see how it pans out. Oh, so this is the fun part. So what can you guys do? So now I'll just speed ahead. So lead by example. Walk as much as you can, cycle if you can, use public transport. I know public transport is awful. I've tried to use the bus. It's shocking. Drive, if you must drive, use an EV, or just if you have to drive a petrol car, drive a petrol car. Don't worry about it. Just do what you can. So advocate with your community, for your communities, with the regional council, other councils and central government on public transport. It has to be better out here. We're not going to get people out of their cars. The aim is, unless the public transport is better.
Yeah.
Have to work on that. So encourage businesses to use recyclable or compostable containers. When I get takeouts from places, I notice pick up the container, can't recycle it. So I have to cross that business off my list. Because we can't, though we've been really conscious about this, right?
Mm.
And it's like, oh, well, they give us a 7, we can't recycle 7s. So now what do we do with this? So it gets used, don't throw things away much, but now it's a problem. So have a program, encourage businesses to use recyclable containers or cardboard or compostable things. They're around. Promote recycling. I notice a lot of people are confused about recycling in town. Like, can we do 1? Do we do that? Can we do 5s? You know, so that needs to be highlighted again. Get people aware of that. Public recycling. When you're out in town, you want to recycle something, the only place to recycle cans and bottles is over by the public toilets in Featherston. Nowhere else in town can you do that. That needs to be better. Help businesses recycle of themselves and their own businesses and get more information out for recycling for households because it needs to be out there. Fast track food waste disposal. One of the big differences we've had as a family is having chickens that consume all of our food waste and having a compost for anything the chickens don't eat. And that's been like our weight of our rubbish bags halved overnight when we did that. And now we're sending half less to landfill than we did. So I'm not saying everyone get chickens. I'm saying we need to find a way to take people's food waste from their houses and get it into some sort of cycle to get it.
I think there's a bylaw about chickens in the urban area.
In the urban areas, yes, there is. Absolutely.
Know what it is.
It could be roosters.
It needs to be changed. The
Well-
bylaw with chickens needs to be changed.
Well, it depends on the urban area because chickens also do bring rats. So I mean, that is,
It's a problem.
I understand that it needs to be changed, but we need to be a little bit realistic on depending on where you live.
Sure.
because-
So if you can bring in rats, then help people set up rat traps. Right, there are solutions. Okay, so promote and support existing circular economy effort.
For the households.
We keep talking about circular economy, places like Miller and Featherston, circular economy. The op shops are all technically circular economies. Help them out. Don't make it hard for them. Help promote them as well. because we need that circular economy. We can't keep taking raw materials from the earth and using CO2 to process them, to turn them into stuff. So I know that some groups want to set up repair workshops, help them. Knowing about your carbon footprint. So I've gone through all the carbon footprint tools on the website. And actually worked out that the one that I prefer to use is the Toitū EnviroCare Transmission Emissions Tracker. They've got one for households, they've got one for businesses, they've got one for travel. Easy to use. I just did a bit of calculating using my Power app, and off we went. So really easy, get an idea of what you've got, and then you can work out what you need to cut or what you can need to change. And sometimes change is all you have to do. You don't have to give up stuff. And find out what the barriers are for our residents to lower their carbon footprint. Again, that's the whole bus transport thing. And cycleways. I used to cycle on the road when I was a teenager, no trouble, hundreds of kilometres, right? Won't cycle out here. The only time I did it, I nearly got hit by a truck and died. So we need to have better ways to have cycling paths out here on the main roads. I mean, it's great. My son, who's at Kuranui College, can't ride his bike to Kuranui College on the main road because it's too dangerous. Also, it's a 17-kilometre diversion if he uses the bridge, the cycleway bridge. He's not going to ride 17 kilometres to school and then 7 kilometres home. It's too far. It needs to be along the main road. I mean, it's great for tourists, but it's not practical for residents who need to go to school. So promote what the council has done. I know there's some talk of council having bought EVs. Great. How much money is it saving? Does the community know that? Is that information available? What else has been happening? Are there any solar panels, and how much power is that generating for the council? So promote what the council is doing and how it's doing it and how it's costing. Yes, it's going to cost money, but what is it saving? So get that out there. Fast chargers, got one in Featherston and one in Masterton. That's not enough. I know that's not enough because I hear people from the EV owners page whinging about it all the time. Please, we fix that. Educate. You need to educate as much as you can and to dispel the mis and disinformation that's available out there, because some of the things that people are coming up now is just, it's like, well, we had this conversation 30 years ago. Of course it's happening. Why are we doubting this still? Like 97% of active climate scientists agree that climate change is real and we're causing it. Why are we still having conversations about, well, I don't know if it's true? It's tiring, it's exhausting, and it's taking away from the solutions that need to be done. So educate, set up places where bring in lecturers from universities. They love talking about climate science. It's hard to shut them up. So let's bring them in and talk to us about it.
So 1 more minute.
Okay. Oh, and climate strikes. Good timing. Come to climate strikes. So this Friday is a national strike across the whole country of people coming together to strike for the climate. I've organised one in Featherston. It'll be great. Yeah, stop. 1 minute done.
Oh, that's.
Robin?
Anyone want one?
Put one up
Council officers.
and the what, hang on, yeah.
Yep. Cool. Thank you very much for that. It was
Oh, they must be.
information to get through in a short amount of time, so I appreciate it. It's really good. Okay. Okay, so the second presentation this morning has been cancelled. Welcome.
Well done.
Come sit over here. Okay. So, yeah, so we did have somebody come and talk about from Toitū EnviroCare, but unfortunately, but we look forward to getting it back at some point. So then the next of the block, we've got our climate change advisor, Sky Halpert, on reducing emissions with clean car energy. Yes, great.
I'm only given 5 minutes, so I've just made it super short and snappy. So yeah, a lot of interest by the sounds of it about EVs and South Marapa and trying to improve infrastructure and stuff. So I thought I'd just start quickly by talking about our current car statistics. So as of 2001, our vehicles are still increasing. We have approximately 889 vehicles per 1,000 people, so almost one car per person across the country. And 75% of those cars in our motor fleet are just private vehicle use cars. So about 17% commercial vehicles and only a small amount of heavy trucks. And in terms of our CO2 emissions that are entering the fleet, we see a decline, pretty good decline in used petrol and new petrol vehicles, which is encouraging, but only a small reduction in new diesel vehicles, which obviously some people need them for work, and because of the lack of good EV or hybrid options for utes, but also a kind of mindset of people buying bigger cars now because they just want a bigger car, even if they don't necessarily need them. And so we've got that clean car discount on at the moment. I was about to buy a hybrid and then I thought they scrapped it and then I didn't. So the bold line here is the current, the pricing as of July onwards, and the dashed line is the current pricing. So if you buy a used EV, you can get a rebate of about $3,500. If you're buying a used petrol or diesel van or ute, you can pay a fee of about $3,500. As for new vehicles, for a new EV, you can get a rebate of up to $7,000, and then other side you get a fee of about $7,000 as well. So trying to encourage people to move to EVs, and because the scheme was actually so successful that they were not actually making enough money out of the fee end. So that's a positive thing, I suppose. So in terms of our public charging, Ron talked about that briefly. We've got 2 chargers in Featherston. We've got 4 chargers in Carterton, which aren't even on the map currently, and about 6 chargers in Marsden. So obviously, kind of a big going on right here. The rest of
Big time.
Can I ask where the other charger in Featherston is?
Yeah.
It's right side by side, aren't they? They've just,
There's only one charger.
There's only one charger.
that's right, yeah.
They use it one at a time.
I should know. I was instrumental in getting it in there.
To the next.
Well, on the website then it says that there's 2 chargers, but
There are not.
one at a time.
They're not site, they haven't got one, haven't they changed that to one each side, or is there only just,
There's one charger,
okay,
got 2 connectors.
right,
What the two,
Yeah.
I think that's what it means.
yeah.
So you can charge 2 vehicles.
No,
No.
not at the same time.
No, I don't think you can in Featherston.
That's one.
I think it's just the different fittings, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm not too.
And where are the other 2 in Carleton?
So we have 4 behind the event centre.
There are 4 there, okay.
Well, there's 4 parking spaces, so I'm not sure about this. What, you can only charge 1 at a time, that sounds.
The other 16 amp grand caravan ones,
Whereabouts?
behind the library.
in the
They're
car.
quite new,
That's
because I know that,
not,
yeah.
not caravan chargers.
No, but they're 16 amp. They're slow, but they're not.
Yeah, they're not the rapid charger, yeah.
But they're not rapid chargers.
No.
So they're designed so that you can, go into town, have a coffee, mull about, or, go to the event centre, watch something and your car would be charged afterwards. And about 6 in Marsden, so there's Power Shop by the park and can't quite remember where the other one is. But compared to the rest of the Lower North Island, very big sort of gap going on in South Island.
Very big.
So Waka Kotahi currently released a charging our future strategy document. And so a couple of the targets in there that was particularly relevant for a place like South Wairarapa. So they want to create a journey charging hub every 150 to 200 kilometres of main highway in the next 5 years. And so the journey hubs are essentially like a petrol station for EVs. So there will be those rapid chargers you can plug in for 10 minutes and then you can carry on your journey to Taupo or wherever. And then more importantly, all settlements with a population of 2,000 people or more should have at least 1 public charging facility by 2025. So all South Island towns would obviously fall into that little statistic. So in the next 3 years.
Sky, I'm aware that it's been an infrastructure issue for us off the state highway. In previous years, we were working with the power generating companies to inquire to ask what's possible down here, and I understood it to be a transfer issue, a power transfer issue, that it isn't on the distributed at the same rate as it is along the state highways. Have you looked into this at all? Have you heard anything about it? That was one of the main blockers for us getting
And that part of the
charges of this part of the South Wairarapa.
Shouldn't be a
There are
problem.
no problems getting additional charges into the South Wairarapa.
Then why don't we have them?
Well, because nobody's actually asked for them.
Oh, yes, they have. We just.
That's not true.
Well, who did you ask?
May, it's been brought up right from when Colin.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
First one in Featherston, and we were told that they were going to roll out others and they haven't happened.
Study.
Can I help the floor, please? Thank you. Okay, so there are basically three types of practical charger that are used in New Zealand at the moment. The most common one is the ChargeNet system, which is ubiquitous throughout New Zealand. ChargeNet have the charger in the Featherston supermarket. They also have the one near the park in Marsden. There's another one in Eketahuna. There's one that does not work in Palmerston North. So when you bear in mind that Palmerston North, in fact, has one ChargeNet, which didn't work the last time it was there, and one provided by a private company, which did work. In actual fact, the Wairarapa looks to be pretty well off, matter of fact. So at the beginning of the year, I rang ChargeNet and I said, what's the prospect of more chargers coming to the Wairarapa by ChargeNet? Now, there are benefits to ChargeNet chargers, which I won't go into here, but I think it'd be fair to say most people would agree this is the gold-plated option. And they said, yes, indeed, they do have plans to bring the next set of chargers in the next, I think 6 years possibly. But there is a lot of demand for their chargers. However, things may have changed in the budget. I saw a little side note somewhere to the effect that in fact more money is going to be given for charging stations. Now, there are now two other options. And the thing about the ChargeNet, this is the reason why there won't be a rapid ChargeNet station coming unless there's been a lot of money. They are very, very expensive to install because of the electrical requirements they have. However, and here's a number to bear in mind, a ChargeNet charger charges at 50 kilowatt hours, 50 kilowatts per hour, which means that for an average car such as mine, usually 30 minutes gives me enough to get to wherever I'm going. Now, there are two other types of charger. One is the type that Carterton has. This is provided by a private company, in this case, Meridian. Meridian are not the only providers. Meridian, Z Energy, I think it's now called, Tesla, are all potentially in the market of providing chargers. Now, the benefit of the Meridian charger is that it costs the council nothing to install, basically. This is the same benefit that ChargeNet have. It's a gift, sort of. But there are a couple of disadvantages. The Meridian ones require the car driver to bring their own cable, which is actually something most car drivers tend not to do. Because when you go to a ChargeNet, you have the cable. This is why somebody is kidding us that Featherston has two, because they have two cables. But that's because, for the most part, this and Leafs use a different cable to everybody else, just about. The other slight disadvantage, though I don't personally regard it as such, of a Meridian charger is that they, instead of charging at 50 kilowatts per hour, they tend to charge at roughly half that. Now, Some people think that is a disadvantage. I'm not persuaded, however. I think in places such as the Wairarapa, where you've got people coming to places maybe like Greytown and Martinborough, if we can encourage them to stay for 60 minutes instead of 30 minutes, they might buy 2 cups of coffee and they might sort of do some shopping at the same time. So I don't see that as a disadvantage. However, the big advantage of the Meridian ones is that provided you have a substation nearby, they are very easy to install. And this is the limiting factor on any charging network, is the convenience of the substation. The other slight disadvantage is of a Meridian one is they collect all the money. Now there's a third option, which is the council could install we could do it tomorrow. We could buy the charging station.
Interrupt you there for 2 seconds. The second part of today's meeting is that we'll be going into a workshop where we can so do the division setting and where we want to go with the council.
Go for it.
So can we put a pin in that and come back to it and just let Sky carry out? Sorry,
just a very quick in response, and I have to go early. So James O'Connor was working on some additional charging stations in Featherston recently, and a number of sites were looked at. And I haven't had an update since, but that's
Just and probably there's some of the points you talked about, Martin. So in terms of the strategy document, it acknowledges that people in rental accommodation or without easy access to home charging, there will be a barrier to EV uptake in the region. Although for a large part of Wairarapa, I don't imagine that's a huge proportion, not the easy access to home charging bit. And they're even charging across different companies. So like you said, we've got all these different companies and you're paying with different apps. And so is there a way to consolidate all of that so you're not having to have accounts with all these different companies? And then commercial investment is challenging when there's limited residential demand. So if you have an EV here, you charge it at home, why would Meridian spend so much money to put it in for you? If we want our tourism industry, we want to encourage visitors to the region, that's where our public charging infrastructure is very important. So my final thoughts are that we're putting a lot of investment into the way people drive, but not a lot into getting people to stop driving and using different forms of transport, as Ron was talking about, public transport, active transport. We don't have good cycleways, we don't have good public transport. And it doesn't acknowledge the price barriers to EV ownership and who's benefiting the most from that. So it's only really catering to a certain market of people at the moment. And then we also need to put a lot more effort into changing public perception on EVs. I was writing the slideshow and the girl next to me at Carlton's like, those are lame e-cars, how embarrassing. That was my, short 5 minutes.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
I'll go and open up.
We'll fix the Wednesday thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
Thank you so much as well for your discussions there. That'll be good. Thanks, guys.
Back to Russell.
Yeah, so Sky, just in terms of the number of EVs registered on New Zealand roads, I mean, the government back quite a few years ago now set a target of by 2023 we'd have 23,000 EVs on New Zealand roads. Do you know what the number is today?
I haven't. I was trying to find what other specific things, but I didn't look into the national ones. But I think something like they've massively exceeded, especially with that clean car rebate, they've exceeded how many. It's like 300% more like EVs or something being bought. So I'm not sure of the exact.
Okay. Did you know that answer to that question?
73,000.
Sorry?
73,000.
73,000. Yeah. Okay. That's a big step.
Quite a lot more than
Yeah.
they were expecting.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe in terms of new car purchases, EVs or hybrids are actually now more than ICE vehicles.
Shame.
Sky, thank you for that last slide, because what stood out for me is that it's a clear depiction of the influences or the areas to influence beyond traditional council role. And if you're problem solving, you want to look at the due influences and those wider factors. So that was good that we had those listed, and for recognising the value in trying to change or shift some of those markers. Not only it's out what's inside, what we can do as council, what's outside, but it throws up the topic of our potential future role as influences in the education sphere. So I think that last slide was quite pertinent.
Could I just make a small comment? That was very helpful. There's also an opportunity on farm vehicles. We have an electric side-by-side that works fine on your farm, Kaiwaiwai. And its price was similar to a ICE vehicle. So it's all those opportunities we need to take, that when there's not many options, but there is actually a New Zealand designed Chinese built side to side actually available now, and we've been running one for coming up to a year, over a year.
It's great.
I think one of the things that Sky sits in my team, obviously, and so the climate change strategy sits at a policy and governance level in the organisation. And, you know, there was real commitment from our current elected members as Triennium to focus on climate change. And we do have our regional climate change strategy. What I don't think we've got at the moment, and this is a gap that I feel like we've got, I don't know how Sky feels about this, we haven't really had a decent talk about it, is that we don't have all the little pieces of work that we're doing gathered into a single kind of clear work program. It kind of sits in a whole lot of different places across the organisation, and it has to, because obviously climate change is a big impact across a number of places. But I don't think we've really got clarity around what we're doing and how it connects to any kind of big picture goals that elected members may want to start planning for. And I think that long-term plan that we've got coming up is a real opportunity for us to do a bit of a rethink about how our work programs are structured, to give visibility and impetus to the work that we're doing in the climate change space. At the moment, it feels hidden, and you know, you talked about that as well. You know, the fact that we don't really talk about the good work that we're doing, it's kind of in all these little pockets all over the place. I mean, it sits in planning, it sits in our relationship with mana whenua. It's, you know, so one of the things that we were talking about earlier, or that you guys both presented on, was the use of public transport. So Lisa, who's our positive ageing advisor, and leads the work on the positive ageing strategy. In that document, we've got a real focus on use and availability and practicality of public transport for people with accessibility issues, and older people often are in that space. And she's ended up on the Regional Transport Advisory Group, which is a really good influencing point that we've got, knowing that, for example, if I've got a gold card, I can't get on a train and get into the city and get back in one hit because the gold card hours don't match the train timetable. So you end up driving to a medical appointment, or to go shopping, or to see friends. So those kinds of things, I think we don't really think about all these pieces of work that are hidden in a whole lot of places. And I wonder if potentially part of today could be starting to think about some of where those hidden pieces of work are, and what would it look like to bring them together into one small clear work program. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, well, does that kind of line up with what you're talking about? Because you're next on the agenda.
Oh, am I?
current initiatives, exploration of areas for influence, opportunities and priority setting, and aligning with the LTP outcomes, which.
There you go.
I'm just going to throw it to the mayor.
Well, just picking up on the point with which I agree with, I actually think our biggest point that we're in is actually to join with the other three councils and have a concerted approach to these issues, partly because the climate doesn't stop at the rivers. It's Wairarapa wide. And if, for example, we wish to influence the way that the regional council delivers public transport, I'm not sure that they would pay necessarily a lot of attention to the district council's pleadings, but they will pay attention to the three councils. The other point is that actually we do have quite a good opportunity because after all, Sky works both for Carterton and for ourselves. So I mean, there seems to me to be a natural alignment between working on the same things there, the same issues around rural picking up work both sides of the river as well. But the other thing is that actually just in terms of giving some practical effect to what you're talking about, Masterton has actually a bigger group of people working in this area than we do. And actually, just as it happened, Masterton has a most remarkable climate change advisor that they are really fortunate to have. And I think we would be unwise not to try and align our resources, thinking and actions just purely because of that one person.
Can I, I wear many hats, and one of them is convener of Sustainable Wairarapa, and we hold a very before Christmas with a view to coordinating these sort of things, and we finally got around to having another one on the 11th of June, and I ask hopefully Sky will come and as many people who want to. We're working with the Master, with Lisa as well, and we see a role for Sustainable Wairarapa. It's just basically coordinating, acknowledging all the good work you're doing and help point you in the directions that we would like to. So everything you're saying is what we believe, and then I work in also in agriculture groups and the other side, we can talk about that later if you're time or interested.
Be okay to bring you up a little bit after the meeting, is that okay? Yeah.
Huh?
Sorry about the noise. I've asked Amy to grab with the whiteboard, so that's what.
Sure.
Whiteboard driving license.
Let's wait for this noise.
Yep.
I do work quite closely with Lisa,
I'm sure you.
especially with all the regional projects as well, so.
And Lisa's three councils, so she sits with us, Carterton and Masterton, so.
Other,
The other Lisa.
Oh, the other Lisa, apologies. Now I'm getting very confused.
I have to remember, so, so one of the things that I've discovered organising the climate strike is that whilst there are many individuals and a few groups who are really keen on doing something about climate change, they're not connected together.
Yeah.
And it's like I sent in a request to somebody who runs a science list. I said, can you share this with your members? Oh, no, we don't. We only do this one thing. I was like, okay, so it means that I've had to try and make contact with multiple different people, all to do the same thing. And some of them all know each other and don't share information, aren't sharing my information across each other. Some of them are, and that's been brilliant, but just the public aren't connected. And so that's one of the things that I want to try and work out of this is get the public connected, because we're not. I mean, some of us are, and there's more connection seems to be in Marston than down here, but that's something that really needs to be worked on, and that's a public thing. But it could also be part of this committee thing as well. I think with EV, funny story, I'll be brief. I took my car and encouraged about 7 other EV owners to take their cars to a car show in Featherston. We arrived, they said, you can't park with us because you might explode. You have to park over there in the corner away from everyone else because your cars are dangerous. And I mean, excuse me, you guys drive Molotov cocktails. And hence why I ended up writing a whole paper on the rate of petrol cars versus hybrid versus EVs catching fire. And safe to say that 1 in 25 EVs per 100,000 catch fire as opposed to the thousands of petrol cars that catch fire per 100. So yeah, so there's a huge educational issue out here. EVs are not boring. Mine, even though I've got a really minor, like my EV is one of the smallest you can buy, very zippy, does all the trips we need in the Wairarapa, up and down, easy peasy. So, yeah, but sorry, rant over.
And does anybody else have anything that they want to comment, contribute?
Just thank you, Guy, for that. It's awesome. I guess for me, do you ever think that the affordability of EVs, hybrids will ever come down? Because right now, you know, in regard to Māori, there's very few can even afford registrations, and public transport is a big bonus, but there is some disconnects with that from the Wairarapa.
Well, even for me, when I was looking for a, you know, secondhand hybrid, and, you know, you want a certain battery, you know, you want a certain amount of Ks, so you don't have to replace a battery, you're looking at 12 grand for a decent something or other. So yeah, like, and that's, I talk about that quite a lot, because yeah, I mean, with all technology, it will get cheaper eventually, but in the meantime, if you're then also increasing petrol taxes, who are the minority they're getting squeezed? And it's the same with like power and stuff like that too. So yeah, that's the problem in terms of equity of, you know, yeah, we're pouring all this money into EV infrastructure and discounts for EV owners without recognising. Yeah.
But I think it just brings to mind that we still need to make sure that our public transport is connecting everyone to where they need to get. I, for one, am a little bit disappointed with the train.
Oh, yeah.
I think one of the things that I'd love to see over here that works really well in big cities, but I think could work here as well, is car sharing. So like not necessarily each person owning their own car, but having a vehicle available that you can book for an app. It's shared costs, so it's not such a locked up asset. And if that was an electric vehicle, all the better, but yeah.
You take that point and extend it and put it in an urban context. As up in Auckland, they've got ride share lanes where at least 2 people in the car. So that aspect is getting more people into a car, getting the sharing happening and putting it in forms of recognition. And so, but we're a small council, we've got dispersed roads, but yeah, it's
opportunity.
looking for examples with an idea and implementation. Yeah.
Yep. Great. Right.
So just about EVs, if we replace petrol cars with EV cars like for like, we will run out of resources. We have to move to walking, cycling and public transport. And public transport is so important out here because we are dispersed out here. And I mean, we will jump in public transport as a priority. We only use the EV because we can't get to where we need to go. And it's the only reason we have the cars, that we have appointments we can't get to on the bus. And if the buses are better, we'll just use the bus or the train. And so that public transport needs to be more of a focus than EVs. EVs are great, fantastic if you've got the money for them. But ride sharing is an awesome idea, but we have to improve public transport first, cycling.
Right, we might go over to you now, Amanda, because this is a bit of a joint presentation between the both of you. Or we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, quite a bit of an hour.
So I think one of the things that I've heard really strongly from you guys particularly is that coordination of work in the community is currently lacking. And so the main mechanism that we've got.
I'll be out here for about 6 things to do.
Okay, all right. So we've got the strategy. Oh, put all the letters in. That's got those areas of focus. This one's down the bottom, you know, and it's got a couple of bullet points against it. And when you're talking about these activities, they're largely behaviour change. And yet the behaviour change intervention is the thing that's kind of down here as a piece of work. Just a reflection. It's not a criticism. It's just like, if we want that to happen more, then this probably needs to have a higher focus, or we need to be doing a bit more work in that space. And there's a whole lot of things that, you know, you could do. But I think the main mechanism that we've got, besides the Ruamahanga strategy, is obviously the long-term plan. So currently we have a spatial plan. And that's got a 30-year, is it 30 years?
30-year horizon, yep.
Yeah, so that's that's one of Russell's key documents.
But also links to the LTP with
Yep.
the 10-year horizon.
Yep, and that comes down to the LTP, which has a 10-year horizon, and then we do 2 annual plans like that. So you can start to see your points of influence to get these bigger, longer term visionary documents. You know, when you say, well, we can do this quite quickly, and we're talking about 10 years.
Yeah. For a geologist, yeah.
You have to be in these spaces to really influence the change that we want to see. We have to be a bit more visionary. So I think, you know, there's a real opportunity that we've got coming up. We're just starting to have the conversations about our next long-term plan and what it could look like and what shape it could look like. I mentioned before this kind of gap that I feel like where these activities are hidden in the Ruamahanga strategy. They don't have a huge amount of visibility. They're not so strongly connected into here. They are, but I think that this really strong connection between these documents helps us see that policy shift. So I think, Robin, you talked about the fact, what have we got, an undesirable ranking or something?
Yeah. Insignificant, yeah.
Bad marks. And our policy, I mean, that's the central government.
Yes.
But we've got control over the local policy direction that we set. Obviously, our elected officials make the decisions. It's myself and people like Sky and Leanne who'd be doing the advice space. You know, what do we know? What's the science tell us? What does the evidence show? What are the councils doing? So that we can try and inform a good quality outcome. One of the things that I was thinking about as you were presenting, Robin, as well, is what could we do? Like, we've got a really tight budget. You know, we're in a position where this good old person here is taking up a ton of our money, and then this one, but probably not in the way that we want it to take up money. It's currently very focused on roads and continuing to drive cars that are diesel, and so that is taking up a lot of our chunk of our money because it's we don't have alternatives. We don't have ways or things that we can do right now that will help us shift our behaviour. So that so when you talk about behaviour change, incentives are really critical. So that the EV modification, we penalise people for doing something and we reward them for doing something else. That is where you get really good quality behaviour change. It's a really good evidence of our midwife's nodding because she knows about that kind of intervention at a real you know, individual level. So that was smoking. Yeah, that's right. And tobacco control is a really good example at a policy level around how you shift behaviour. It's kind of the gold standard when you look at this is something that's harming us. What do we need to do about it? We need to change individual behaviour change. We need to change systems that enable it. And then they put in a whole lot of mechanisms at a policy level and at a personal level that meant that it was easier for me as a person to stop smoking than it would be for somebody to continue. And there'd be support for me to do that. So I guess that's what I wanted to say, is to really hone in on this opportunity that we've got with LTP. my team are currently putting together the project plan for that. So what are the key milestones that we need to reach, by what dates? But the thinking will and the critiquing will have to come from our elected officials, and the direction setting will have to come from our elected officials, so that we know what's going to be critical in this document that's going to help set us on a different path that we're currently on. Do you want to add anything, Russell?
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to spend here writing rather than talking, but we want to lift our thinking as well. Seeing it, the impetus of our good work, but make links to what's out there. So the regional plan for, in terms of climate change and being an influencer and setting the longer term direction, really the regional council is a core component of that. So you've got the regional plan itself, and you've also got the regional policy statement. And within our realm, yes, we've got the non-statutory spatial plan with the 30-year horizon and the LTP, which we have to, land key components in, but also review. So we're always making it as current as possible. In the RMA sector, we've got the district plan review. Mayor talked of combined effort. So that's an existing example of a combined effort of 3 councils working together. The first combined district plan across the country. We're doing the review at the moment. When we talk of climate change, what are the key aspects there in terms of having a current fit for purpose document that captures issues of the day and also strategic component?
Russell, and you probably get to this, but RMA reform and the impact that RMA reform will have on I guess on our projections and where we move to in the future is going to be quite significant. And we haven't had a lot of information about what it's likely to look like to a large extent. And I'm just wondering if that all can be slotted in at some stage in the future so that we get a good understanding about the implications of that.
So that's one of the workshops that I was talking about around the policy and strategy.
Right. Okay.
So the roading, water, and RMA reform.
Okay, Scott, thanks.
As Russell was talking of, that's a big part of the conversation. Is the legislative reform which we're currently facing.
Yes.
So obviously, you've got water reform, which who knows how that's going to end up in the next 3 years. We've got RMA reform. So the RMA has been split into 3 acts. 2 of those acts will likely go through before the election. The 3rd one, which is the Environment Act, is still in discussion. And if we get a change of government, then we're going to get something quite different. We don't know. So I think the key message in this space is this might be something you might have said recently, Martin, is if we don't set our own direction, it will be set for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got an opportunity when we're in a change environment. If you can be agile and forward thinking and inspirational and visionary, you can go, it's okay, we've got this under control, we know what we're doing. As a district, we're really clear. As a region, we're really clear about where we're heading and what we think our issues are and how we're going to address them. So, but it feels very uncertain. We talked about liquefaction. We feel like legislation is currently liquefaction at the moment. The ground is really unstable. It's shifting. It's moving. You can stand on a bit of ground that you think is stable and it give away. It's a bit of a metaphor.
I would raise another point as well, and I was had the misfortune of being in Christchurch during the February 2011 earthquakes, and the innovation that went into recycling efforts post-earthquake was quite astonishing. So we take things like roads, for example. They were using the concrete from the building as the base layer for new roads. So I think looking at opportunities to actually look at new ways of demonstrating a commitment to reducing the impacts of those big gnarly decisions. We know we need roads, but how can we do it in a different way that isn't just about doing the same thing as we've always done? Yeah, there's some amazing technologies coming out of the UAE, for example, about self-charging roads, and I know this is all in the future, but it just goes to show how, you know, anything's possible if we just think about what our future needs are, rather than doing, you know, looking down at your feet and saying, well, this is the way it's always been done. And the only the only driver is the cost. You know, but the longer term effects of any decisions that we make are just going to increase that cost anyway.
Well, even from the cost point of view, I know the presentations that we've had from Remo, when they talk about $1 of investment pays back $6 of.
That's right.
of losses.
Yeah. In preparedness. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask you just to make a comment, if you can remember the comment you made to me once, because we were having a discussion around the fact that Aston Carterton had pursued what Amanda has called the Ruamatanga Strand, which I recall is an 80-page long document.
Yeah.
Versus what Masterton did, which was not to have a, if you like, a climate strategy, it was to have a climate plan. And you made, I thought, a number of very astute observations about the differences between the two. And my own view is that what Masterton did is a much more doable.
So I've taken,
Right,
there is an action plan that sits under the Ruamatanga strategy, and I've taken these from the action plan, which is a 24-page document.
So now we're up to 100 pages.
So this is also due to be reviewed by May next year. So now is also the time to change that if you want to as well and make it.
I
think on that,
I was really hoping for was that Paul would recall some of the, I thought you had some very.
it was in part, it was really around how we find ourselves making decisions, and the long term, the default that we always find ourselves thinking we need a strategy, we need everything needs to be long term, rather than actually doing things and affecting change in the here and now. And so the fact that and I remember the discussion, Masterton had chosen to take a policy which is very much in the here and now, how we do things now, rather than within the have a strategy to define the work plan, I thought was interesting. You know, I'm not suggesting it was wrong, but make sure we actually, you know, we let the rubber hit the road now, and we actually make some progress now.
You also made the comment that Masterton had a certain amount of what you call virtue signaling in there, and I don't disagree. But nevertheless, your bigger point was that you could see this starting to affect change.
Yeah.
Quite
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think there's actually some different drivers to behaviour change. I think what you're talking about here is important and will need to, but there's actually one other driver to behaviour change that I've noticed in the last couple of years, should have been 20 years ago. And this is actually coming from the markets, from banks, from insurance companies, and Fonterra and all of those people. And they are happening in the Wairarapa. So I also think that one of the biggest ones I've seen is a paper or an article on insurance company on directors' insurance. Now, you might wonder what's the point of that? But 83% of directors in most companies have director insurance and cover their backsides. To get directors' insurance now, they're starting to have to justify how do they know what the impact of their business is, what is the life cycle of it, what are they doing about it, and if they want insurance. So they don't have to believe in climate change, they just have to.
So banks the same, Bert?
And banks.
Yeah.
When you're getting money, so farms now, you can get 2% discount for environmental projects that have verifiable benefits. So I accept all these things are good, but these other things will make as much change or probably more. And I'm not saying we need to do the lot, but we need to understand what's happening and where you can fit into that. I have no idea how, but I feel you need to understand some of the more changes that have been happening quite recently.
If I can pick up what you're saying, what Russell possibly is doing, my belief is that the most substantial thing we can do to help resilience in this part of the world is all through the planning side of things. And Russell has referred to Wairarapa district plan. I have to say, not that I've heard anything that causes me to think this, but I have to say I'm very despondent at the moment that it's actually going to come out with things that put us in the place for the next 10 years. I mean, my classic example is the $5,000 water tank that was suggested. I mean, that does nothing, you know. What we have to do are we getting around to grey water? Are we getting around to, I mean, we're talking about transport and energy usage and what have you. We will do more to reduce energy usage by aligning our houses east to west than we will do by just about any other single thing. Our road planning can actually reduce distances. I mean, I think it was Robert mentioned the 17K trip to get to school one way versus basically 10 Ks to get to another. Now, unfortunately, we don't actually control the state highway road reserves. So, you know, there are some things we can do and some things we can't. But nevertheless, what we have to do, I think, is to focus very heavily on those things that we as a council can influence. And I'm in no doubt that planning is by far number one on the list. If we plan properly, houses won't be put near where they'll be inundated by sea rise, for example. If we plan properly, we won't have wasteful land use just happening, you know, sort of hither and yon. There's a huge scope there.
The one other one I would like is the smart electrical grid, because in fact there was Genesis did a project in the South Wairarapa a number of years ago. They've got the technology to do it, and that would enable community solar panels, sharing power, enabling farms to put it on and share the power. It's good that I'd like to see energy generation and solar, but I would like not just to be overseas pension funds. I would like to see the community and people being able to do that. So it's good to put solar panels on your house. Maybe it's good to have a community one and where you can be part of it. So then everyone can participate, but you need a smart grid that you can economically share this stuff. So there's all those sort of things. I'm not sure where your regulations fit into, but you should encourage and promote it at least.
Excellent.
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just jumping back to some comments that have been made, Colin, signalled the importance of, legislative reform, aspirations and a new shape coming out of central government. So under the change of the RMA, what have we got? What have they gone with? So the RMA will be reviewed. That has been led out by an ex-High Court judge, Tony Branderson, with his crew of people. The new shape or format will be in 3 aspects. So RMA will go, often a act that's been highly criticised over the years, tinkered with, reshaped, but it is now being taken up as being totally reshaped. So they've done work on the built environment. The core of the RMA will be the new Built Environment Act in terms of the urban situation. They've also recognised the importance of councils for results, councils dealing with growth and longer term outcomes across all of the country for spatial planning. The component of spatial planning has been lost out of planning for quite a while. And so they've recognised that and the importance of spatial planning. Hopefully they will have a position on that before the election. They've done a bulk of the work on getting the Built Environment Act shaped up. And the last one, which they've left to last, perhaps because it's such a meaty topic and it's a bit nebulous at times, is the Climate Change and Adaptation Act. So we need to watch that space. It's a matter of us doing our work, looking at what we've done so far, refining it, but also what strong points are being let out from central government. The other points I've made here are in terms of, yes, Greater Wellington Regional Council need to push strongly and clearly articulate response and avoidance of impacts of coastal hazards, for example. But we've got to do our work, and we're doing our work in terms of the Warwick Combined District Plan. We're hoping to take that out for consultation towards the last quarter of this year. When we look at climate change, we're actually talking about natural hazards. So coastal erosion, which has been talked about, flood hazard areas, liquefaction, where there are existing earlier maps done, but the accuracy of those maps need to be quantified a bit more. And then also recognising climate change as a key one of the key strategic topics for the district plan review itself. So that's where it's landed in terms of where we're seeing dealing with climate change and the 10-year, the capture of rules and policy to those issues. The other thing that you'll see if you scan across the horizon, you've got to keep an eye out for what iwi management plans are being compiled by the respective iwi. They've always been Kaiti Akitanga, guardians of the environment, and they've been those guardians, for example, in the 90s when it was pro-development and it was all growth and development, and the iwi have held fast in terms of seeing their clear recognition of the importance of the environment and as guardians, and so we've got to look at that as well in terms of connections. So that's a portrayal of some of the framework.
Just wondering, Amanda, the new Māori tūhono strategy coming out too, whether that's a framework I think Greater Wellington are picking up, as well as was it the Sustainable Development Goals? So I see they're talking about putting them into long-term plans, and my cousin has a really good example of how to do that.
And I think that's something that you see in the context as well. Any climate change strategy has to start with centering Indigenous knowledge and
coordination of.
I question whether it's, we're taking it a step further, I think, with this conversation, because coordination is one thing where you seek to understand and align different pieces of activity, but actually what we're seeing across this is the integration and the influence that these various pieces of work can have one another. So you only have to look at things like a policy, a future policy around coastal retreat, as we talked about at the previous meeting. That ultimately is going to affect our Wairarapa Combined District Plan. It's going to affect our roading strategy. It's going to affect this, that, and the other. And so coordination is one thing, you know, acknowledgement of what is going on. But there is an opportunity to capitalize on the opportunity that comes from a policy setting direction to make sure that we are getting the most out of a revised plan, whatever plan that might well be.
I think the other thing in this space is, you know, quite often it's that, I agree. So when you do have good coordination, you have great integration and you have more influence or impact. So it's that classic, you know, 1 + 1 = 3, you know, you do more things together, you get a greater impact. I think that's one of the things that I was thinking about earlier when we were, you know, we've got a very limited budget. We don't have a huge amount of money. How do we do things that are low cost, that are private partnerships, that are innovative, that look to other partners like the banking, insurance companies, businesses, where they're already driving change, that we can piggyback onto and go, our role in this, our bit in this is going to be X, Y, and Z. And that's when you get that systems thinking around change management, which is quite, you know, it's a really good opportunity. So what can we do that is low cost, easy to do, quick wins, low hanging fruit, that will make a difference quickly? Do those things and do those things now rather than wait. Cool, so what it is.
It might well be, okay, so we're talking about I always start at the point of zero, no cost whatsoever, and then anything else on top of that's a bonus, right? So if you start at what can you do for zero cost? Well, we can start to look at what are the expectations and the deliverables that we set around recycling of waste to support our roading efforts. You know, costs you absolutely nothing, but during a procurement process, you can make that as part of one of your essential criteria that you expect of any contractors.
So we do have that in our procurement. We rewrote our procurement policy a little while ago, and that's absolutely in there. So in the procurement policy, we've used what's called a social procurement model. So, which is aligned with lots of our EB partners want us to use the social procurement model, and that looks at green, you know, what are you doing in the climate change space? And interestingly for me, we've had 2 procurements that my team have done, and we've gone with smaller, not local, because we haven't got local businesses here that have been able to deliver on it, but, you know, community-based organisations rather than with the big, you know, orgs that are doing it the same way all the time. We've gone for innovative approaches, who organisations are thinking about their climate change impact and their social impact.
Are there things though that are actually better than no cost, that will actually save you money?
Yeah.
And in fact, we put in 54 kilowatt solar panels by our dairy cow shed. We're earning 14% on it, and I've cleaned them once. Power price has gone up, I think the returns increased now. So that is actually helped the climate. This actually fixed their costs and actually lowered them. That's because we could use 90% of the power. So you need to look at, you don't need a subsidy, you just need to calculate.
Yeah.
So I always think about the social housing that you have. So if you painted the roofs white, you have a 2-degree drop in the summertime in temperature, so you don't have to cool the building as much. You put solar panels on it. Solar panels are 5 to 10% more efficient on a white roof than not. The people in those houses, they get direct access to the solar panel energy and what's left over gets sold to the grid. But now their power bill's gone down from $200 a month to $40. Right, and for social housing people, that's a huge deal. And then if you put it on, and so white roofs also have the benefit of whatever white is available sends back out long wave radiation back into space, which has less opportunity to be captured and bounced around and heats us up. So it does three things for us. But if you can get solar panel, if you can get white roofs on the big buildings that you've got, and I know it's not going to be traditional and people are going to be upset by that, but now you can cool down those larger buildings that you've got, like this one and the Anzac Hall. But solar panels on public buildings will save the council money because now the council's generating their own electricity and then making money by selling it to the grid. So individual homeowners do that all the time and we want to do it, and there's an opportunity there.
Palmerston North City Council's got that. They had that about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's like anything, we'd have to examine that cost benefit aspect and look at and be transparent with the community and match that against other potential expenditure.
Yeah, it's a budget, it's all.
The economics are, if you can use the power, are a no-brainer. If you can't, you would want to look at it. But that's when smart grid and there is battery technology coming that may help that as well. It doesn't involve lithium or anything like that.
And of course, there's the example, it might have been you that was telling me, but I've seen it on TV as well, where Sydney, that they've done a study on the impact of just making sure that their streets are much more heavily forested. And this can have in summer the effect of bringing the average temperature down from, I think it was 35 degrees roughly, which definitely means you have to turn on your cooling system down to something like 23. I mean, that's virtually a no cost, making good use of verbs and et cetera, which otherwise serve no, but it's also very, very low cost and very sensible. If the temperature rises near future, so.
The at the high level, like Amanda mentioned, the spatial plan there, that's had to clearly map the four well-beings. So whilst we're talking about climate change and being active citizens or responsible influencers on it, let's just recognise that in the spatial plan, our longest term document, we captured, and it was a result of discussion, a result of liaison with iwi, two things that spring to mind: regenerative planting, specifically around the lakeside, and the recognition for betterment around the lake, and the captured topic of biodiversity corridors. So you're doing your planting, but you're also responding to getting more biodiversity, animal life, creature life within the district. So we've got those two things captured and existing. So it's finding those already identified work and stuff we can further work on.
Russell, can I get your opinion on something? Because I have no confidence in councils like ours to do spatial planning sensibly. And I'll give you an example, and you may remember it. People in this town often come up to me and complain about the fact that they can't get workers in their hospitality businesses. And what's more, their kids have all gone to Australia. And I say to them, you don't think that had anything to do with you, by the way? They're, oh, no, nothing to do with me. It's the government. I don't think so. You had the choice back, and you'll remember quite recently, to have much more intensive building in Martinborough, and you kicked it down the road. And I actually remember I thought a brave planner from your team, Russell, Even though the council had said we want nothing to do with, low cost housing that keeps our families here and creates workers. One of your planners came back and said, surely people, you have to consider this. And the council said, piss off. And it was about as blunt as that. Do you remember it?
I remember that discussion because it was a follow-up meeting to represent and the consideration of densities down to around 150 to 200.
So they were getting good advice from you and your team, and they ignored it. Yeah.
And I think it may have been Kendall and I that said, well, would you consider potential of 200 densities of 250 within the urban boundary of Martinborough? And that didn't get across the line, didn't it?
So decisions have consequences.
That's it. Okay, did you have more to?
No, I'm just wondering where you want to go next. Like I can take a photo of, it's a very big jumble, but I think in my head it's a mind map. It's a bit of a kind of some of the thinking that we've captured. I don't know what else might want to be, Russell.
The only point that I haven't made, and it's something that the Mayor has raised, or I think the Mayor's view on documents, the value of more shorter or concise documents, and it has a value point because it means you get your transparency, you get your easy capture of the issues, and you can still look at linkages between issues or overlap, but the value of, and it directly links to what you've said in terms of a capture plan that shows the linkages and then we can work from there for a concise
Diagram.
plan or diagram or framework of where we can put our efforts. And whilst we're doing that, look at what's going to get us ahead quite quickly, what's cost effective, what's within the normal realm of a council, what's outside our normal remit, things like that.
So in my head, because there is often quite a need where it comes from, I'm quite sure, probably central government, to have these very dense documents with a whole lot of good quality research, facts, information behind them. But when I was at Stats at NZ, we shifted our focus to having very short front end information and then something that, oh, I'm interested in that, I need to know more. You can dive down into kind of a middle level, and then for the researchers and the people that want to go, oh my gosh, where's the table where that data comes from? You build that in underneath. So you kind of have you could do a 2-tiered or a 3-tiered approach to documents where you go nice, clear, simple front end, Joe Public, middle for, somebody, a partner that might want to know a bit more about where you've come from and what your thinking is, and then your really deep background knowledge that you probably need in a lot of instances to back up what you're saying.
Can I make an observation? I don't know if it's just me and the way my brain works. The box of this is coordination of work in the community, and yet everything on that board is not in the community, it's in council. So we've got, for example, what do we know that's actually happening in the community? So we know, for example, Cape Palliser Road, eco reefs. And there's various other things that's going to be out there, innovations that we just simply don't know anything about.
So the Mayor and I have had conversations in the past, and I think in our first meeting we kind of brought it up a little bit as well. The idea of having a list or a document or a drive to capture that work that's happening across our communities and in the environmental space.
Stakeholder analysis kind of thing.
Yeah, but sort of more that it's something that we can use within the council, but also is open to the community, so everybody's aware of what it is. It's been a little hard to really nail down about how that's going to look, who's in charge of it, who updates it. it's
And then the other-
something worth revisiting.
And then the other thing is, what isn't on there is around the new Emergency Management Act, so.
Yeah, I wonder.
When things like, when things go belly up, you know, how do we coordinate our efforts? And understand the range of environmental issues that might result in some kind of response, and then how do we resource it? So, we talk about, in the emergency management space, we talk about climate change as something that could lead to an emergency response, rather than how do we rethink how we manage emergencies to better respond to a varying range of climate issues that might occur. Yeah, you wouldn't respond to an earthquake in the same way as you'd respond to flood or anything else. Yeah, so how do we reverse engineer it, basically?
Mitigation beforehand.
And the resilience that, and so that feeds into our roading strategy, you know, don't just talk about building better roads when you actually, in fact, a rural road isn't going to look the same as a state highway, isn't going to look the same as an unsealed road, isn't going to look the same as a tar sealed road. You know, so all of these need to be, this is where was my issue earlier on, right, is that they're not independent of one another, they are actually interconnected, or at least they should be.
See it kind of like a visualize it as a web.
Yeah.
Everything will
Yeah.
connect to itself.
Most certainly, yeah.
If you, on one of my other hats, I'm on a committee that YP2K have catchment communities. We've got MPI funding, and that's a map of the catchment communities around the Wairarapa. And my embarrassment, the South Wairarapa is quite blank. Part of this problem was that this money come with very little notice, and there was Beef and Lamb had Hill Country ones, but I've endeavoured to try and develop. So these are catchment communities that there's MPI money for facilitating, for not for planting, but for building capacity. We're just finishing 2 years of expenditure of 1.1 million. There's potential for about 300,000 a year. The next 2 more years, they're trying to organise whether they're still going to do it via YP2K or whether they'll set up a separate thing. But what I'm saying is, I'm sitting and listening to all the same things you're talking about happening in all different places. And this is where we need to share. And I'm just, that map shows you what's been established, and there's a gap. I'm not saying you have to fill it, but if you have an opportunity to encourage and help fill in the gaps, I'd encourage you to do it. Which, so, yeah, that's just another, when you're talking about other things, so there's the catchment communities, which tend to start with water testing and then pest control, planting, climate change is in there, but it's really getting integrated solutions. Well, you don't one day work on climate change and water quality the next day, and roading the next day, or infrastructure. It's that integration, understand what's happening in your community, where you fit into it, where you can help, where you may be hindering.
I think that's one of the really, there's a massive opportunity there, like huge. And I was at Auckland Council when they were doing similar, working with the community groups doing exactly that work, and incredibly powerful. The other thing around that is that quite often our central government agencies come up with money that they want to give away, and they create this criteria, and you don't have anything ready. And we potentially have got a number of projects that we could be ready to take to the next stage. And you never get big windows. You get 4 weeks or 6 weeks of application time, where you're like, MPI or MB or somebody else has got a chunk of dollars that they want to give out to local communities, and we're like going, quick. But if we've got a really clear approach, we can go, right, the next stage of this project is this. Let's ask for $500,000 from whoever, they've got a grant going out, we can fund that next level of activity. So that planned approach is really critical.
I guess that would be sort of feedback from me is that as governance, you've got largely a very friendly council towards environmental change and climate change mitigation adaptation. So my challenge would be back to you guys, back to officers, to make sure that that work's being done in the background as much as possible with all your free time. And
I think that's what I started the conversation with when I was sitting over there, was like, we don't have, that isn't really well sussed out at the moment. It's in these funny little pockets all over the organisation. It's not all together in a, and that, that's been the interesting thing about forming this committee as well. It's like, what do we bring to this committee? We don't have a program of work that we can easily bring to this committee and say, here's where we're at. This is the next big decision. What do you guys think about these 5 options? We don't have that program of work other than the Roamahanga strategy and the action plan that sits under that. But again, I think that's could do with some improvement, even having after this conversation.
Yes.
I think for our coordinated or captured climate change plan, easy to read plan, whatever, if that's what it is. We've got to make sure we've got all the components in there and look at the opportunities, look at coordination and alignment. Now, the point that I was going to say is that one thing that we haven't, you look at the role of the regional council, for example, doing good work on working with rural sector, streamside planting, plantings help with, carbon issue, but also cooler water, help the health of within the water and biodiversity within the stream. So, good example. New policy by regional council, perhaps a risky example, and the mayor knows of this, I think. The viewpoint that South Wairarapa is seen as a future planting base for afforestation and being a strong approach for dealing with carbon. But how does that new afforestation and extent of it impact upon normal agricultural practices in a rural area and the aspirations and the daily livelihood of farmers through multiple generations? So, example of new policy has to be landed cleverly or look at the impacts.
I mean, I think offsetting shouldn't be your first thought. It's once you've done everything else, you look to offset then. And I think, and internationally, offsetting's frowned on. A lot of the markets want to know the greenhouse gas intensity of your product and life cycle. They also want to know, animal welfare. They want to know how you treat your staff. The list is very long. I'm not saying, that pressure is building far faster than it has for a long time. And it's, people are, discussing it, and if you want to borrow money and think forward, you need to think how you're going to actually report these things. And also, it's a trade negotiators, that's the first thing they keep telling farmers when they're talking to them about. That's, one bad advert can ruin years of access and work. It's not greenwashing. You've got to be able to, stand by it. You've got to have a realistic view of the world, but that's and that's where people are coming from the markets and, they're inspecting not which farms, they choose which farm they come to. So, yeah.
So recently the Climate Change Committee came out and said some words about the ETS and about offsetting and I've talked to some other climate scientists, and offsetting is really dangerous in that it makes us really lazy and not bother with mitigation. So mitigation is so if you think of our world as a bathtub and the CO2 is the running tap, what we need to do is actually turn the tap off before we start cleaning up the mess. Or as we clean up the mess, we have to turn the tap off first. And all planting forestry does is not turning off the tap, because they go, I'll just plant a tree, I'll just offset it, it'll be fine. That's really dangerous. With that, in that way, we won't meet targets, because people will be spending so much money just offsetting and just planting trees in places that aren't useful to communities or to farmers. And you just end up trying to capitalize our way out of it instead of actually turning off the carbon dioxide tap that we should be doing. That's a huge risk at the moment for New Zealand, because we're so focused on, we'll just use the ETS to offset, it'll be fine. But we can't do it. We have to change.
If we're talking about in terms of what we're doing as actions on the council to reduce our carbon impact in this area, that's not something that we should be talking about. It is something that we could potentially explore as a funding model to be able to fund other projects that do go towards turning off the tap.
Yep.
So I think there is space for it in planning, but not as the front and centre, this is how we fix all the problems.
Yeah.
Something we can do as well. And it's certainly been a comment that I've heard from other people, that they don't want the Wairarapa to become the lungs of Wellington.
Yeah.
So to heard that comment, but that we don't end up with Wellington being able to have as unlimited cars on the road and us trying to balance out by just planting things everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, trees have their own benefits in cooling towns.
Absolutely.
And that should be encouraged. But planting pine just to offset Wellington isn't something we should be agreeing with.
No, it's not. I completely agree. Okay, so I think we're kind of almost coming up to the end of our session. I would love to see this conversation continued with more elected people around the table. You've got two very important ones here, but it's a conversation that should be going on with a lot of us, because it's going to step into that sort of councilling space. But maybe we can talk about how that happens. Did anybody have any final points? Yes.
Third way to get an EV charger is to pay for one. So the company or ChargeNet use a provider of EV. They don't make it or import it. They purchase chargers. The chargers they purchase come in a range. The 50 kilowatt hour ones are not suitable for us for various reasons. But there is another one, very much the same capacity as the Meridian ones. We could just purchase it and we could ring up the local electrician and install it. The only requirement we have is, do we have a suitable substation? Now, Greytown, which I know best, has a substation near the library, so we could easily turn one of our car parks there into an EV charger. Round by the Working Men's Club car park, there's another charger there, so we could install it there. If we were to buy one, it costs in the order of 15 to 17,000, but the benefit is it would come with cables, so we would need to annoy travellers. The second thing is we collect the money. It's our charger. We get the money. But the third thing is, I'm not sure that we would ever have to pay $15,000, because actually what we've got here is a wonderful opportunity for sponsorship. I actually think we could get the community to largely, or the wealthier parts of it, to front up with much of the bill. So anyway, there are three opportunities, and
It's an opportunity for business investment as well. If
Yeah.
people in our towns are
Yeah.
reliant on tourists coming over.
Yeah.
And there's more and more Teslas and bits and pieces coming over the hill. It's definitely in their business and their.
oh, absolutely. So the short-term problem is we own the car parks. So what we have to do is to go to business and say, look, we're happy to use some of our car parks here, provided you're happy that we have car parks near to substations. I don't know where the substations are in this part of the world. Is there a person who knows that off the top of their head? Must be something.
You want to put those green boxes.
Yeah, they're about, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You've probably seen them on registered. Yeah. But again, I would think an approach to the market business people, whatever it's called, association would probably get us a very long way. It's very doable. We could have one next week if we really wanted. Well, maybe next month.
Fantastic. Excellent. Is there anybody else who has?
Are there any key actions, Rebecca, that we want to capture?
I'd like to see this somehow written up in, so it's more of a reference document for
Recording the conversation?
yeah, but also for us going forward in conversations that we have with other council members or at other meetings, so that we can refer back to it and say, this is where it fits.
Oh, we haven't taken minutes. Really.
That's fine.
Yeah, you've taken some minutes. Have you? Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you, Amy.
I don't know, matches everything up there.
What I've written and what Russell has written is probably the things that we're hearing with our own lens over the top. So I'm really, I've got my own filter. I might not have captured everything, so I'm really conscious of that. But I think it's potentially a starting point. It might not be.
Can I maybe suggest then that this is one of the topics that are being brought up alongside the roading, the warfare, the RMA reform, because those are intended to be monthly forums that we just revisit a couple of hours at a time, get councillors together and attack the issue.
That would be the risk we have with doing that is if we did them once a month, we are getting really close to being 4 months down the LTP process, and we probably need to have this conversation. Well, let's talk about timing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's this group is aware of these issues, and it's I see as our collective responsibility to bring it into the discussion around LTP, regardless of whether all councillors have been feel fully informed.
It'll be really nice to get to a point where we can say things like, we would like 15 electric car chargers, and we would like 10,000 trees per year planted, and we would like 25 more solar powered buses on the road, and know where we bring that across the table, what that needs to feed into, that we can kind of take our wish list and turn that wish list into an action plan. Without missing opportunities or without, like you say, there's some really big key changes coming up, and it's hard for me, and I'm sure for others, to keep all that in our heads of what needs to happen when, nobody's going to come and tap us on the shoulder and say, oh, you need to have this into us by.
Well, yeah, because the other thing is around national policy statements as well. So if we take, for example, the recent one around the development of the railway, further railway through the Wairarapa, increasing frequency of trains, buying, is it 50 new trains? Those are all diesel, I assume. Hybrids. So at what point does the conversation be about the fit for purpose nature of the solutions that are being coming up with? Because we know that the electrification of the network is far beyond where it's currently being exploited. And it just feels sometimes that we still have things being done to us rather than us actually saying what we feel we need as a region.
Cool.
Two suggestions. One is that we ask Sky to start informal conversations with Lisa from Masterton. Not the other Lisa.
Climate change. Lisa.
I will do the same with Gary Campbell and we'll see what we can get to there. But the other thing I thought was valuable, in fact, was having the non-council people here today. And I wonder if it's possible for us to set up in fact, a completely forum where actually we go out and shoulder tap some other people. And, I'm thinking of the why waste, et cetera, and let's see if we can grow the number of community-centred people. I'm thinking Clive Patton, possibly, certainly like more involved from Benelin.
No, there's real opportunity here to do our engagement better as well. And one of the mechanisms that I've seen work in other contexts, not necessarily in council, is and we do a little bit, we have user groups, but stakeholder advisors or, some kind of community stakeholder advisory group. And that can be fluid. It doesn't need to be the same group of people all the time. It could be, just a group of people that get together and there's an open invitation. We haven't got anything like that. And that comes into this space here and who are our stakeholders and that whole idea of integration and what's the impact.
And indeed, who are our champions? Because
Absolutely.
That's the question.
You can guarantee that the moment we go to put solar panels on this roof here, which incidentally has to be an economic thing to do, but you will get grizzles. And if we could only have a group of people who were ready to say, hey, come on, have you done the maths? Can you not see the benefit of this?
I mean, there's even, using that example, there's no need for solar panels anymore because when you build new builds, you just have tiles on your roof, which are your solar tiles, and it's basically the same thing. So there's all kinds of solutions out there, just because it's a thing.
But we've built this one already.
Well,
And a huge water tank off this roof would have been sensible. Final words.
Yes.
Kia ora, Kato.
Kia ora.
I've come here to have a listen because, it's people regarding about climate change and what's happening in that space. I'm a representative on a Taupo District Council, I'm a Māori representative. And so that's a great learning curve to be able to engage and be involved and listen to it. But one of the things that I've said about, and you just touched on it about, interested parties and different groups, and being a Māori representative, I'm looking at where's the Māori representatives of those in those groups that can come and assist. And being a lot of Māori land, which is probably when we're talking about deforestation, there's engagement about that, and then we look at the future of that, and we look at what's happening on the East Coast, and we got in slash that's come on for that. So that impact on what that's going to happen to our region here, the aesthetic look of forestry trees as well. And I know that I had a conversation with a lady this morning and around what they're doing with their mara. So, regarding their nurseries and their planting, and they're going on a hikoi around 3 or 4 different regions to learn what they're doing in that area. So that's an organisation that's been here. The short, concise document that you talked about early on, that all the important things in, not the 24-page statistic type stuff, research, that suits Māori, and being able to get the engagement across a lot easier if we can have something like that. So that, that's just my observation sitting here.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
with you on
fantastic.
that.
Thank you. May I say? Absolutely.
So we're going into the mana whenua space as well. I correct me if I'm wrong, but iwi are developing their own plans. It's for us to acknowledge that and respect that. It's not for us to try and change that area. It's how do we work together, and it's going to take a little bit of time, I think. But I'm very assured that our iwi are developing, working on their own. And it's for us to take that on board whenever we do something as well. So I'll park that there.
Only China does that, I'm not sure.
Yep, no, they do.
Yeah, really good to acknowledge that and to bring that here, and I guess also to reflect that our role sometimes isn't just in partnership, but it's in support. So recognising that those the iwi plans, if they're the primary documents, and then what we're doing is supporting that. Yeah,
Sure. It's exactly what Paul said around not doing too,
yeah,
we do it in all spaces, but how do we work, how do we put it together like a jigsaw and say, right?
Yep.
Asset mapping.
yeah, making sure that none of the stuff that we have done and all of our good intentions impedes or makes things harder than they
Doesn't impede.
out of the way. Yeah.
When is the next meeting do you have, or what type of thing do you want to?
I think we meet quarterly. I'm gesturing at Amy here. I don't know if she's seen me gesturing.
Okay. Saw that intense look of 23rd of August,
Because
the Wednesday.
Yeah.
23rd, did you say?
Yes.
And again, likely we'll see as we get closer to it, but I imagine that will likely end up being the same sort of format, because I don't think our committee's at the point yet where we're making decisions. So yeah, I don't know that we necessarily need to have it as a formal meeting, but I like this. This is really good, nice and collaborative. So
presumably by then we'll have some results from the district plan.
Also, the Wellington Region Climate Change Impact Assessment should be done by then.
the waste management plan will be further along the lines.
And we'll be deep in LTP thinking.
Yep.
Discussions.
So maybe it's a hybrid meeting.
Maybe it's a hybrid meeting, maybe it's not 2 hours.
You could possibly run the first part as a forum, and then you could move into a formal.
Yeah.
To make it, if you wanted to, like, it's totally up to you.
Thank you. Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to call it. Thank you all very much for your time. A closing karakia. Would you like to have the closing karakia, or would you like me to? Pronunciation is not as good as it should be, but I'll do my best. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, haumea uea.
Thank you very much.